Hey guys, and welcome back to Perfect Timepiece. Now, my name is Josh, as always, and today we are going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about the different complications available in a watch. Now, if you are a longtime subscriber of my channel or you're a watch enthusiast, this may seem like a very dumb video, but I do want to lay it all out there for the new people. And if you've been watching some of my new videos, you'll notice that I've been having a lot of reports with me when I make these videos. So again, I do have a report with me with all of the information that I need to bestow upon your brains. And let's hop right on into it. So the first complications are largely centered around the date. So obviously one of the most important features of a modern day watch or a modern day timepiece like this lovely Christopher Ward is that it tells you the date in addition to the time. Not all pieces, but some pieces do. So the most common date complication is shown in a date window. Now, there is something very, very similar to this called a big date, and usually this is at the 12 o'clock position. It's very similar to a date window, but it actually has two different wheels for the different numbers, for the tens digit and the ones digit. I'm probably not explaining this very well, but it does make the date a lot more prominent and a lot easier to read on the dial. Another really interesting-ish thing that I'm not a really big fan of is the pointer date option. This is where a hand on the watch actually points to a scale on the outside of the dial that has the dates from 1 to 30 all the way around it. So up next, we do have a subsidiary dial. This is basically another dial on the face of the watch that has the date in a ring around it, and again, you have a hand that points to the day. Personally, I'm much more a big fan of the date windows. It's easier for me to read. Personally, I'm not. I know this may come as a shock for a few of you. But I'm actually not very good at reading analog time or reading analog dates. So I do like to have the date window, which is kind of a digital display. So I am going to kind of move a little bit faster with these, and I'm actually not going to cover all of the GMT complications because while doing the research for this video, I figured out that there were like 20. So I'm probably only going to talk about one GMT complication. But we're not even there yet. So in addition to telling time and telling the day, some watches have additional complications to tell you the month of the year and even whether the year is a leap year or such and such. So and even the day of the week. So the most common, I would say, after the date window complication is the day-date complication. Now, what this basically means is that you have the day of the week and the date, the numerical date of what day it is in the month, right on your wrist. Now, personally, I actually find this kind of helpful because I kind of know what day it is, but I do have alternating schedules depending upon which day of the week it is. But if you are working an 8 to 5 job, I can see why it wouldn't necessarily be that useful because you are definitely counting down the days until Friday or the weekend. And you know what you're doing on the weekend. But we're going to move on. So we do have the triple calendar. This is basically the day, date, and the month. So basically like Thursday, July 4th. This is something that kind of makes sense to me, at least, because that's kind of how you say the date, right? Thursday, July 4th. But, watches can tell you all of that information as well. So in addition to this, we have a much rarer and harder to achieve complication, this is the perpetual calendar. Basically, it is a watch that is accurate all the way until 2100. So, you know, I think, what is that, 84 years before it has to be reset. Now, of course, it doesn't have an 81-year power reserve. So if you take it off and it gets behind, you will have to reset it again. But if you wear it daily, you are saved the trouble of having to change the date or the month or the day of your watch. So that is something that is very, very cool. Kind of a step below that is the annual calendar. This does not take into account leap years. I don't even think it takes into account the shortened days in February and all of that nonsense. So you will have to adjust this watch every so often, but again, personally, like, I don't think it's that big of a deal. But again, these movements, the more complex a watch movement is and the more complications it has, the more valuable it is kind of in the eyes of the watch community and to watch collectors. So I am going to move on to the second page of my report, and we are officially out of like day and date and month and year telling complications on the watch. So now we're up to kind of more fun things, the complications of a chronograph. So the first thing that I have to say is, if you're new to watches, a very common mistake is confusing chronographs with chronometers. And what a chronometer is basically a Swiss watch that has been certified to be extremely accurate, while a chronograph actually has a timer function built into the watch. Now, you may, if you're coming from like quartz pieces or really cheap Timexes, you may be thinking like, oh, it has a stopwatch? Like, why is that a big deal? Well, it is actually a lot harder to manufacture than just a simple watch, because you have all the machinery and all the gears behind the function of the stopwatch. So we are going to get into more even further specialized versions of chronographs. So the first kind of one, and I'm not too familiar on these complications, so I will have to kind of look down and reference my notes here. So we have the mono pusher. This was introduced in 1923 by Breitling. Basically, it has one button, and basically one button to start, stop, and reset, instead of two buttons commonly found on most chronographs today. And yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of cool. You know, you have one less button that you have to guard against water resistance and all that other stuff. So moving right ahead, we have the flyback chronograph. And basically what this does is, as soon as you hit so if you're timing something and you hit the reset button, the hands will go back to zero, but then they'll stop where they were counting before. So basically, if you are timing something and you hit reset and it takes a whole second for the hands to reset, the chronograph will actually stop at 1 second and then continue counting from there. So basically, it allows you to time very precise timings. This was actually used a lot in aviation before basically digital clocks and modern instrumentation was developed. And then we have the split second chronograph. Basically, this is a chronograph with 2 second hands. As the name would suggest, it has a split second. So you have 2 different pushers for each second hand, and you have 1 reset pusher on the case of the watch. And basically, this is good for timing anything you would need 2 independent second hands for. So up next, we do have a tachymeter. This is an instrument for measuring speed. It's commonly found on watches and chronographs. For this to work, though, you do have to be moving at a very constant velocity and then you will be able to use your watch to tell a whole bunch of different things, like your speed, your distance, and you'll be able to do a whole bunch of different unit conversions. All right, so we have all of the GMT complications. There are about 20 of them. Like, there are pages and pages of complications. If you do want to know more about GMTs, there will be a link down in the description below to the article where I got all of my information in this video. But basically, GMT watches allow you to have a second time zone displayed on the watch. So instead of telling the time for where you're currently at, you could have, if you travel a lot or, you fly around the world, you can basically set a time zone for local time and then have a time zone for home time. And then, you can very easily just look at your watch and tell the difference in times. And there are a whole bunch of different ways that is accomplished. There are watches with 2 separate sets of hands. There are watches with a 24-second or a 24-hour hand. Again, check out the link in the description down below if you do want to find out more. But we are moving on to some of the more prestigious and sought after complications on watches. So up next we have the moon phase complication. This is a complication that's commonly found on dress watches, and it's kind of pricey to get, even if you're looking at Japanese alternatives. So basically, if you're not familiar, what a moon phase is that it tracks the phases of the moon right on your watch. Personally, I've done a little bit of like night sky photography, and if you guys don't know, like, the moon gets in the way and it actually kind of blocks out all the stars in the sky. So that might be useful if you're a nighttime photographer. Otherwise, it's just a cool complication to have on a dress watch. Like, oh yeah, tonight's gonna be a full moon, and then your colleagues will parade you around the office as the hero. Yeah, I'm not really sure how useful that is. Up next, we do have a power reserve indicator. So if you're not familiar with complications and you're very new to collecting, basically what a power reserve is basically how a mechanical watch works is there is a gear in the watch called the main barrel. Oh gosh, I hope I'm giving you the right information here. But basically it holds it basically has tension in it, and it releases that tension periodically and steadily throughout time, which is what turns the gears inside the watch and what in turn turns your hands. So what a power reserve is basically how much tension that barrel, or sometimes watches have more than one barrel. Basically a power reserve for a watch is how long the watch can go without you winding, and it's a function of how much tension can be held in that bezel, not the bezel, in that gear. Yikes. Okay, I'm just gonna move on, but a power reserve indicator is something that you can see on the front of the watch, and basically it's just like a fuel gauge, if you will, but for your watch, which I think is actually pretty cool when you get into some racing themed watches. So up next, we have a complication that I personally really like. I think it's one of the subtle dress watch complications that kind of just blows my mind. This is the jump hour. So normally on an analog watch, you have the hour hand sweep very slowly around the dial, and then obviously when the new hour hits, the hour hand lines up with whatever hour it is. But with a jump hour complication, basically the minute hand moves and the second hand moves, but the hour doesn't actually advance until the next hour. So basically it doesn't move, and it basically jumps ahead on every new hour, which I think is pretty cool, and I think it actually adds a little bit to the legibility of the watch, but they can be very expensive. So I'm not even going to get into it. So up next, we have an alarm. Yes, believe it or not, mechanical watches can have alarms. Basically, you have another sub-dial that shows you what time the alarm is set for. This obviously is to remind you to do something throughout the day, like make a YouTube video for perfect timepiece. Yeah. But it can be useful. Most people just use their phones nowadays, but I do think that there is a convenience with having an alarm on your wrist so you don't have to walk around with your phone all the time. Up next, we have quite possibly the second most expensive complication of a watch ever. This is a minute repeater. Now, I can't actually find one of these that is under $1,000. I looked at Quartz. I believe it's a Quartz Citizen watch. Excuse me. I have to reference my notes, and I'm blind, so. But I think it's about $1,200. So for a quartz piece, yeah, so definitely not even a mechanical minute repeater. But if you do go mechanical, you're talking like tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, for this complication. And basically, what it does is it audibly tells you the time. It has different chimes for the hours and different chimes for the minutes and for the, yeah, not seconds. That would be a little bit much. It would be dinging like every second. But basically, it tells you the time audibly, and this used to be a really big complication in the 18th and 19th century in pocket watches, but obviously, you know, or maybe not obviously, but it has kind of gone by the wayside as watch technology has advanced. That being said, it is very, very hard to do, and there is a lot of mechanical processes involved in performing that action. So being able to do it properly is kind of a very big accomplishment, and that's why the pieces cost so much. Up next, we have the most complicated watch complication and the most expensive watch complication. This obviously is the tourbillon, or the tourbillon. Basically, what this does is very commonly it'll actually show you on the face of the watch. It'll show you the escapement of the watch. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's where the main spring of the watch kind of vibrates back and forth at a certain frequency, and that allows the second hand to move and drives the whole watch, basically. So it's kind of like the heart of the watch. And basically what a tourbillon does is that it spins that cage. So it puts that disc in a cage, and then it spins it around either 360 degrees, or it'll do like a gyroscopic three-dimensional turn. The three-dimensional turning ones are extremely expensive, like hundreds of thousands of dollars if you're looking Swiss, so like $400,000. a little bit outside of my price range. But it is interesting. The whole idea and history behind the tourbillon is very interesting. You know, it was invented by who is it? A.L. Breguet, and basically what he thought was if you just turn it around, you won't have to worry about which position you set your watch down in or which position you're wearing your watch. And basically it counteracts the forces of gravity, or it was supposed to. It's not really known if the technology really works or not, but it is supposed to increase the accuracy of your watch. But that being said, it is more of an aesthetic thing. Most tourbillons do just move in 360 degrees, and they don't do the three-dimensional gyroscopic movement that is so cool. But yeah, so I think that is a pretty good overview of, oh gosh, there go my notes. I think that is a pretty good overview for all of the new people getting into watch collecting and whatnot, of all the complications available on the market. So if you see somebody on YouTube or somebody in forums talking about different complications, you'll know what they're talking about. So my name is Josh. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.